This is just a random bit of texture, right? Looks a little bit inconspicuous, so what is it? Why did I make it? But I think most importantly, why am I showing you it? Well, what happens when I do this? Does it kind of look like a mountain now? I didn't really add much. All I did was up the contrasts and added a sky to refine the shapes of the triangles, but the textures are still there. I didn't really change anything. In all honesty, that texture thing was just a bit of scraped off paint from a brush that I added too much paint to the pot. I didn't really need it, so I just scraped it onto a piece of paper. But it proves a point I want to make. In my poorly spelt and badly thought out opinion, there are 3 things to remember when starting to paint in acrylic. For me, at least, things that have really helped me understand how to use the medium. Just for a disclaimer, I am definitely not a professional, nor am I saying I have all the answers. This isn't a tutorial on how to paint, but instead see it as my thoughts and observations about painting. Feel free to add your own input in the comments, because I am sure there are many of you who would really like to start painting but maybe are struggling. And any feedback will help me too, honestly. I'm still learning how to paint and all that. Anyway, there are 3 things that I like to keep in mind when I'm painting. 1, that a third of the work is done by me. Number 2, a third of the work is done by the brush. And number 3, a third of the work is done by the audience. Okay, so let me explain that. Number 1 is fairly obvious. I'm putting the paint onto paper, and broadly I control where the paint goes, so no really need to explain that one. But number 2, a third of the work is done by the brush. Now, a brush, be it a paintbrush or maybe a sponge or even a plastic bag or anything you like to use really, is not a precise medium like a pencil or a pen. It's broad, it's imperfect. Even on an A2 paper or whatever, it's not very direct. I appreciate that as you get better, you'll probably use more refined, fine, sharp brushes with thinner tips and less bristles, but I'm referring to the start of the painting process, like where I'm at, or maybe where you're at. But you probably understand the feeling of painting over lines or trying to paint small, intricate, tiny details and messing up because your hand is about as steady as... well, some of that's not very steady. However, I've found that that's not really using the paintbrush to the best of its ability. Sure, you could paint each individual blade of grass in a field or each individual leaf on a tree. That is amazing, but I'm too stupid to do that. I find using the brush pretty naturally makes a grass-like texture. Then applying a couple layers of slightly different green roughly gets the grass effect without needing too much patience. The example I gave before works like this too. All I did was I took my paintbrush, dunked it in the black paint and smeared it over paper, really, is all I did. The brush did pretty much a third of the work there. I didn't do all of those tiny black details by hand. I think it's easy to understand how you can use this for a tree too, or maybe a patch of snow or anything, right? Here's a more finished example of what I mean. The figure in the centre was done in pencil, so that's not really the important detail here. What is important is the background. Look at the sky, for example. It's not one particular colour. It's loads of shades of blue and white, gradienting and covering each other. Those distant glaciers haven't got the best and most exact shape or consistency. The clouds obscuring the halo ring aren't picture perfect, are they? Neither are the more white of the clouds or the more prominent clouds, or the blues of the low-lying icy lake. And you can see all this by zooming in. I didn't create all those imperfections or subtle little details either. It was the brush, really. And it was achieved by treating it like a brush rather than a pencil. Here's another example of a painting I did. Take the sky. Look how unprecise it is. Look at all the colours and how they interact. It gives the illusion of light and clouds and, well, whatever you want really. But nowhere there was I completely exact and perfect. Not in any way. Zoom into the snow on the ground where it's shaded. None of it is planned or intricately painted. It's just a lot of blending and, well, witchcraft, I suppose. It's almost like an illusion, right? The details aren't really there. I haven't done every single snowy hillock or blade of grass, but your eyes and your tiny lizard brain have converted those details into a picture. Now we're at number 3, see? As in, number 3 on the things I said earlier. But don't just take my paintings as gospel or whatever. Let's check out some other works. Does this still apply? So this is the sort of artwork I'd love to be able to do, because it's just, well, I mean, look at it. It's a painting of the Forge World map from Halo Reach, but back to my point number 3 again, it's you and me who is converting all the little details the artist has given us to make sense of what's happening. We don't need to be told that there are trees dense with leaves, clouded foggy cliff edges, bushes, and even the clouds themselves. But let's zoom in for a second. Those trees don't even have leaves on them. Those bushes aren't exactly perfectly coloured or drawn. The cliff edges are the same too. It's all just textures, but it's all you and I need. Let's back up again and look at the halo ring. Fucking amazing, right? Looks exactly like what you'd imagine it to from this distance, but zooming in reveals that it's all just simple, unrefined, blotty textures that anyone could really do. But because of the context in this piece, it's all we need for us to say, right, that's a halo ring. This art piece is obviously far more advanced than what I'm describing. And I think it's probably digital as well, but I think it still applies to what I'm saying. Or what I'm saying applies to that. Now, I understand that art styles exist, and there does exist a thing called hyperrealism, and even on the other end of the scale regarding simple art styles, there's nothing wrong with pursuing either of those ideas, and both can and have produced art I could never dream of equaling. But I'm talking from a point of starting up and improving your abilities, because what I have said here has helped me immensely. I'll show you a couple more examples. Here's some artwork from the game Destiny. They're illustrations of the abilities the player can use in-game, and as you can see, they look like they could have been ripped straight from the game. They're that well made. Now again, I'm not entirely sure what medium this was done in, but it proves my point. Let's look at the solar ability, for example, the solar ability being the more fiery one. Zooming into those wings, it's easy to tell that they aren't just solid lines of orange. There is a lot more going on there. The hues of orange and yellow mix and change as you go down the feathers, and it's kind of patchy as well, not all of it's coloured. Makes it look like actual imperfect feathers you find like on a bird. Look at those red background details in between the feathers. Looks a little bit like the simple mountain painting I did before, right? Look at the Guardian himself. He's actually been created with like hatching lines nearly, but it all comes together to create this amazing little picture. Before I wrap this up, I thought I'd offer up some more tips that don't really correlate to what I've already said here, but I think are in their own way important nonetheless. So I'm not really reading off a script for this bit, so I might stutter a bit, so sorry about that. But an important thing I found is that with painting, you can actually make a lot more mistakes than you think. Now, not necessarily when painting on and against penciled in figures, like some of the drawings I've showed you of mine. But like, say, picture back to the last picture of mine I showed you, the green one with the green sun, right? Well, actually, the background of that is a couple layers deep. The first background I painted onto that was a bit too dark, actually. It was like this horrible dark greeny blue, and it didn't look entirely what I wanted it to, right? So instead of going, right, I fucked it up, instead of saying that, instead I decided, right, we'll just paint over it. And you can get away with that, especially with acrylic paint. I don't really use many other paints besides watercolour, but with acrylic I find you can actually just paint over a lot of mistakes. And then it gives your piece a lot more interesting details and hues and, like, you know, imperfections, and it gives it a bit more... I don't mean to be cliche and say, oh, it gives it character, but I mean, it's kind of true, to be honest. So, if you make a mistake, don't be afraid to see what happens if you just paint over it with a different colour that might be more fitting. So don't lose hope, is what I'm saying. So both of the paintings I've showed you here, the one with the Spartan on it and the sort of green sun painting, are A2, which is very big, but you can't really tell how big that is when just looking at it on a laptop screen or a phone screen, whatever you're using. When people in real life will be looking at it, large pieces can let you get more details into a piece and can just, well, I just find it easier to paint on larger pieces as well. It's more satisfying. And I would go larger than A2 as well, but I just don't really have enough room for the sketchbook I'd need to put A1 pieces of paper in, I suppose. But I would totally do that if I had the room, but I don't. Yeah, don't be afraid to go bigger with paintings. Or anything, really. And a bit of an addendum to that as well is don't be afraid to try new things and use different colours. Like often I found before I really got involved with painting and acrylics is I would just stick to one kind of colour theme. Don't do that. Always feel free to just be ambitious with colours. So I think that pretty much covers everything. As I mentioned, I'm not a professional at painting in any capacity. I'm just some guy who is trying to get better at it. You know, I'm definitely not at the end of how good I can be, I believe. I'm very much at the start of this journey. Just to let you know, don't lose faith if you want to try painting. It's not the easiest thing. It's definitely, I think, drawing is easier than painting. But, you know, you never know if you never try, right? But I also want to mention that I've got a Twitter as well now. I haven't really used it very much, but I think I will, just to like update people when videos are out and extra pieces that didn't make it into videos, and just general notifications and things.
As well as a Twitter, I also have a Gab, I believe. It's basically just the same thing, except, you know, it's not cancerous. I also have a BitChute, so all of my art videos and my big professional videos that aren't gaming related, like my gaming shorts ones, they aren't on BitChute, but all my art stuff is, like the Halo 5 review, the Mothfolk and all that. It's all on BitChute, so it's all kept there just in case, I don't know, one day in the future I need it. So yeah, that's there if you need it. But other than that, yeah, got Twitter, got a Gab, got a BitChute, and I'm looking to make more, and I'll link them if I ever make a new thing on a new platform, just, you know, for expansion. But anyway, see you next time.